I got epic revenge on my cheating wife. Served divorce papers hidden inside her birthday cake. It's time for us to stop living mom's lies and find out who we are without her influence, Hope said. We're moving in tomorrow since mom will be busy with some political party event. When we saw you tonight, we both realized we needed to apologize, Faith admitted. Dad, we were so wrong. You really had no choice but to do what you did. We see that now. What happens when years of betrayal and heartbreak finally reach a breaking point? In today's story, one man's epic revenge on his cheating wife turned a seemingly sweet celebration into the ultimate wake-up call. Divorce papers hidden inside her birthday cake. Stay tuned for the shocking tale of heartbreak, redemption, and closure. I got epic revenge on my cheating wife by serving her divorce papers hidden inside her birthday cake. As I prepared for what would be my last night in this house, I made one final sweep to ensure I hadn't missed anything important. Everything I needed for my upcoming business trip was packed and ready to go. I had informed my wife of 25 years that I'd be parking my company car at the airport. In reality, it was still at the office, along with the other company property I'd already returned. At 45, I had retired early after 25 years in management, opting for 3/4 of my full retirement benefit. By consistently investing my stock options into the company's retirement account, I had avoided significant taxes while securing a retirement income that exceeded my former salary. Last Friday, I deposited my final paycheck, which included vacation pay and an $850,000 check from sold stocks, a tidy nest egg. To ensure the stock proceeds wouldn't be considered marital assets, I had waited until today to deposit them into my new Bank of America account. With this and other preparations in place, I was ready to leave California behind. I had already downsized, donating my expensive suits to Goodwill and keeping only one. With the lower cost of living and tax rate in my hometown compared to California, I'd be better off financially. A one-way U-Haul, rented through my family trust under Uncle John's name and paid for in cash, carried everything I planned to take. My destination? My parents' old farm, a place my wife, Kendra, had always despised. Her disdain for it made my decision to leave even clearer. I had never closed my parents' trust, ensuring the farm stayed outside marital assets. Renting the land to local farmers over the years had built a comfortable emergency fund. Now I could focus on fixing tractors and heavy equipment, a skill I preferred over managing their design and construction. A relative had already prepared the homestead for me, making it livable while I worked on restoring it fully. I wasn't worried. I had everything planned to the minute, including my final goodbye to Kendra. Earlier in the week, I called Kendra to confirm her flight schedule. She was returning home after 2 weeks away for work. Living out of a suitcase is exhausting, she had said, eager to be back. I said nothing about what I knew, keeping my tone light. Tonight was a carefully orchestrated event. 2 hours before Kendra's arrival, my 3 daughters and their husbands would gather to set up her surprise birthday party. We had planned it together, with over 50 friends and family members contributing to the potluck dinner. Even Kendra's boss and his wife were coming, intrigued by the woman they had heard so much about. My daughters thought the highlight of the evening would be a recorded birthday message I had prepared, to be played on the big patio TV. They didn't know the real surprise hidden within the party, or the cake. Before leaving, I texted my eldest daughter's husband, David, to give him my new number and email address. David, an accountant and rising star at my former job, had introduced me to his fiancée, my daughter, during his time there. He knew about my retirement plans and suspected this party wasn't just a celebration. When I showed him the investigator's report on Kendra's affair, his skepticism turned to shock. He was the type who needed hard evidence to believe. While I felt some regret about tonight, it wasn't for Kendra. My regret was for David and my daughters. They would learn the hard truth about their mother in a way I wished wasn't necessary. But the truth had to come out. Tonight wasn't just about revenge. It was the start of a new chapter for me. One free from lies, manipulation, and betrayal. As I closed the door one last time, I felt a surprising sense of peace. My past was behind me, and a simpler, happier life awaited. But the truth had to come out. Before leaving, my lawyer suggested I remove all my contact information online, even closing my Facebook page. Let her worry about the unknown, he said. I agreed. It was a small act, but one that felt fitting. By the time Kendra's plane landed, I had erased my digital presence. She may be your mother-in-law, he added, referring to Kendra, but she deserves this after what she did. I didn't disagree. In our state, she was entitled to half of everything anyway. The last thing I did before leaving was send copies of our bank balances and a list of our small debts to my lawyer. According to the latest property tax assessment, the house was worth enough that, even with splitting it, I could buy a new home and still have money left over to furnish it. As I left our home for the last time, I tossed my cell phone into the garbage under the kitchen sink. I made sure nothing I'd done would be noticed until after the party. Leaving California after 25 years was bittersweet. I was heading back to the quiet plains of South Dakota as a nobody, just as I had arrived all those years ago. Fewer than 10 people outside my family would even notice I was gone. Knowing my recorded message would change the lives of many people tonight made me smile. On the road, I stopped at a cell phone store and bought a new phone, complete with a local number for my new area. Back in the truck, I made one call. When a woman answered, I said, "This is the new number." "I'm headed out." "Got it," she replied. I shut off the phone to conserve the battery for emergencies and focused on the long drive east. The countryside would soon come alive with the rebirth of spring, a fitting start for my new chapter. Kendra and I met years ago at an Aerosmith concert. She was a stunning California girl, and I was just a young guy from out of state. A year later, we married on the day my parents flew out for the wedding. Over the years, we built a life together, or so I thought. Kendra worked in importing and marketing while I stayed in research and development. She still turned heads when she walked into a room, with the same slim figure and stylish confidence she had on our wedding day. I, on the other hand, had developed a typical dad bod and a pot belly. Unbeknownst to me, Kendra had been looking forward to coming home after spending 2 weeks with her boss and lover, Eric Hopper. While their private jet had made her feel appreciated and young again, she was ready to return to her normal routine. When Kendra arrived home, she was greeted with a surprise birthday party. All 3 of our daughters, along with their husbands, had organized the celebration. Over 50 family members, friends, and colleagues were there, including her boss and his wife. When Kendra asked who had invited them, our oldest daughter proudly admitted it was her. "Your boss always brags about you," she said. His wife wanted to meet the woman she's heard so much about. The attention made Kendra feel special, exactly as I had planned. Around 8 p.m., our daughters gathered everyone on the patio. "Mom," the twins said, "Dad didn't want to miss your birthday, so he recorded a special message for you." They turned on the 80-inch patio TV and pressed play. The crowd fell silent as my voice filled the air. "Happy birthday, dear," I began warmly, recounting highlights from the past year. The birth of our first grandson, the marriage of our last single daughter, our last anniversary, and plans for a second honeymoon. "It's been a busy year," I said, my tone shifting. I thought we, as a couple, were finally heading in the same direction. I was looking forward to romantic weekends like we had before the kids came along. Then, my voice hardened. But then I came home from a trip overseas and found this on our security system. It changed everything. The video clip began to play. The footage revealed Kendra and our daughters casually discussing their affairs, who their lovers were, what they did, and when. They even joked about covering for one another. The patio grew deathly quiet as the full extent of their conversations played out on the screen. The first time I had seen the footage, I had been stunned. Hearing them speak so openly about their infidelity had felt surreal. Now, watching it again with an audience, I felt vindicated. I had to watch the footage more than once to accept this new reality. It was both shocking and fascinating to hear how effortlessly my wife and our daughters discussed deceiving their spouses. Kendra bragged about having had 3 lovers over the last 10 years, each bringing her new and exciting experiences, until she got bored. She proudly admitted she was already on the lookout for her 4th. What struck me most was their arrogance. They spoke openly about how easy it was to fool their husbands. "Just make them believe they're the most important thing in your life," Kendra had said. Their words, captured on video, revealed far more than they intended. For some of the spouses who were at the party, the details were devastating. For everyone else, It would be a night they'd never forget. The screen shifted back to me. I've often wondered, I said, did they know they were being recorded by our security system? If they did, this was a sick joke on me. If not, it showed their true feelings toward their husbands. I paused for effect before continuing. Just their words weren't enough for me to believe what I heard, but they did make me doubt. That's why I hired private investigators. The next clip will show what they found. The screen transitioned to video evidence of Kendra and her boss, Eric Hopper, on their latest business trip. The footage, taken during the first week of their 2-week stay, was damning. It captured every intimate detail. The hours they spent lying naked on Vancouver's only nude beach, the luxurious suite they shared at the Westin Bayshore Hotel, the hotel registry listing them as Mr. and Mrs. Hopper, their romantic horse and carriage ride through Stanley Park, candlelit dinners, a night boat cruise, and even a day of whale watching. To an outsider, it would have looked like a honeymoon. By the time the clip ended, the truth was unmistakable. I had been fooled more than once. I reappeared on the screen to deliver my final words. I guess this was your birthday present to yourself, Kendra, I said. Celebrating your 43rd birthday with your newest love must have been thrilling. I can't prove you and Eric Hopper slept together every night on this trip, but I also can't say you didn't. What I do know is your hotel room had only one double bed. I let my words sink in before continuing. To my 3 sons-in-law, I have to ask, do you truly know what your wives are doing behind your back? Because it's clear I didn't. Are you certain your children are yours? Are my daughters even mine? The crowd on the patio remained eerily silent as my questions hung in the air. Kendra, I went on, how many of your so-called business trips were just personal playtime with your latest lover? Was I that bad of a husband all these years? If you were so unhappy, why didn't you just ask for a divorce? I leaned forward on the screen, my voice growing sharper. One last question. Are you such a valuable employee to Eric Hopper because you willingly sleep with him? Or does he pay you extra for kinky stuff? What's the going rate for a married woman to be her boss's personal hooker? I wish I could be there to hear Eric Hopper's answers. I'm sure his wife, if she's here tonight, will want to hear them too. With that, the screen went black. The silence on the patio was deafening. No one moved, no one spoke. The weight of my words and the evidence they had seen hung over the crowd like a storm cloud. Reputations were shattered. Marriages would never be the same. Even in California, where social norms are loose, this level of betrayal left everyone uncomfortable. That night, many couples undoubtedly had serious conversations when they returned home. One thing was certain. This was a celebration no one would ever forget. I later heard that Kendra and our daughters had tears streaming down their faces. I wondered whether they were crying out of guilt for their actions or simply because they had been caught. Somehow, I doubted they were thinking about me. The final twist came when Eric Hopper's wife, Karen, stood up, a beautiful 37-year-old woman. She pulled out 2 legal envelopes and served divorce papers to both Eric and Kendra on the spot. I was told Karen took great pleasure in slapping my soon-to-be ex-wife and calling her a string of nasty names. By the end of the night, both Kendra and Eric were not only publicly humiliated, but also faced the collapse of their marriages. They now had to reckon with the fallout of their actions. Eric, shocked and visibly shaken, realized his wife had been far more aware than he thought. For years, Karen had pretended to trust him. He hadn't realized until this moment that Karen was also my lawyer. Kendra had caused all of this. Eric Hopper would have to fire Kendra if he had any hope of saving his marriage. The fallout from revealing the truth about my wife and my life had already destroyed 5 marriages. My 3 sons-in-law, visibly shaken, told their wives not to come home until they were ready to tell the entire truth. Even though the younger generation often had different views on morals and principles, some lines were still too much to cross. Even in California, where social norms are looser, it was a painful lesson for them, one they had to learn the hard way. I drove until exhaustion hit. Pulling off at a small roadside motel, I parked the U-Haul where the office staff could see it, checked in, and carried a suitcase and my new cell phone to the room. After a long shower, I got ready for bed and plugged in the phone to charge. Curiosity got the better of me, so I turned it on. Almost immediately, I noticed a new message. Home from the party. "Call me." Karen, my divorce lawyer, answered before the third ring. "Hi, darling," I said, my voice light. "How did your day go?" "Better than we expected," Karen replied, her tone tinged with satisfaction. Eric and I arrived at the house around 5. There were about 50 people there, and everyone was in great spirits. The party was flawless for hours. You were right, they had no clue what was coming. Kendra was absolutely thrilled, acting like the queen bee. Karen chuckled before continuing. "Then, just as things were winding down, your daughters played the video you recorded. That's when everything changed." She paused for breath. "Because of what you revealed, I gained 3 new clients tonight. As soon as the video of your wife and daughters played, everyone realized they'd forgotten to turn off the security cameras that day. It was priceless hearing all 4 women gasp, 'Oh shit, we're screwed,' at the same time." Karen's laughter rang through the line. Everyone was stunned. They couldn't believe how casually those women discussed their affairs. And when the footage of Kendra and Eric's romantic getaway played, that sealed it. No one doubted the first conversation after that. She sighed dramatically. "When I served Kendra and Eric their divorce papers, people scattered like someone had yelled, 'Fire!' It was chaos. Your 3 sons-in-law asked if I was a divorce lawyer. I said yes, and that's why I was serving papers. They handed me retainer checks on the spot. Looks like your daughter's marriages might not survive this either," she added, her tone thoughtful. "I drove Eric's car home and left him there. He didn't say a word the entire way. Did anyone try to call me?" I asked. Karen hesitated for a moment, then said, "After most of the guests left, Kendra found your old cell phone ringing in the kitchen garbage. Seeing it there, she froze. That moment said everything. It was your way of telling her you were done, without needing to say a word." I chuckled. "Perfect. The countdown is on. 6 months from when we filed, the divorces will be final. I have no regrets about finding that footage," I continued. "Without it, I wouldn't have met you. Hopefully, they'll settle without a fight. Do you still want everything sold and converted to cash?" Karen asked. "Yes," I replied, "unless Kendra wants to buy me out. With so many people leaving California, it might work out better that way." Karen sighed, her voice softening. "Tomorrow, I'll start the process of selling my law practice. I told my sister and her husband you're on the way. My brother-in-law can't wait to meet you. He still believes you helped him secure his tractor dealership years ago. This new reality they've created has only begun to show its consequences," I said, my voice firm. "I wonder if they'll still be laughing when we're finished." We said our goodbyes, and I hung up, feeling a strange mix of closure and anticipation. Kendra stood alone in the kitchen, holding my old cell phone. She wanted to call me, to tell me that Eric Hopper meant nothing to her. She wanted to say our 3 daughters were mine. But then it hit her, none of that mattered anymore. I no longer cared about her truths. This was my way of showing her and everyone else that I was done. Her lies were to blame. She had been too selfish to consider the consequences of being caught. The fun, the excitement, the thrill of sex on the side. It had all seemed worth it at the time. But now, as the cold reality sank in, Kendra realized just how much she had lost. There was no going back. Loy was still a small town in many ways. People might forgive, but they never forgot. There would always be whispers behind Kendra's back, muted conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered the room. Colin's actions sent a clear message. He had written them all out of his life, at least until he worked through his anger. While Kendra hoped he might forgive her, as he had with her bad behavior in the past, she knew it might take time. Deep down, she began to hope that, eventually, she could win him back. But as Kendra reflected on her choices, she admitted something she had never acknowledged before. She hadn't planned this life. Her affairs had evolved over time. Blaming others and avoiding responsibility had become second nature to her. Being progressive-minded, she convinced herself there was no real harm in what she was doing. After all, she thought no one was getting hurt. She got away with it once, then a second time. By the time Eric Hopper became her 3rd lover, she never imagined she'd get caught. Until today, Kendra thought back to how her career in Collins had once kept them busy enough that they focused entirely on each other during their rare moments together. Now, her own carelessness had tipped him off. Her actions had not only ended her marriage, but also threatened her daughter's relationships, as her behavior had clearly influenced them. Meanwhile, Karen and I had discovered our connection in the most unexpected way. Though we had grown up less than 20 miles apart, our age difference meant we had never crossed paths. I had already graduated high school by the time she started. We only met when I booked an appointment at her firm to explore my divorce options. By chance, she was assigned to my case. When I showed her the security footage, Karen was visibly shaken. She realized that the man my wife was discussing could very well be her husband. Confirmation came quickly through her personal Facebook page. That day, we both understood that our marriages were over. As we worked through the details of our divorces, Karen and I began to bond over the betrayal we had both experienced. Initially, our relationship remained professional, though we supported each other emotionally. Unless you've been through it, it's impossible to understand the swirling mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief that comes with such deep betrayal. Through countless phone calls and long conversations, we helped each other heal. Our shared roots and similar experiences brought us closer. We laughed over stories of places we both knew and childhood memories that lightened the mood. Over time, our relationship grew into something neither of us expected. Last week, after Karen dealt with the fallout with her daughters, we finally admitted that we had fallen in love. For now, our relationship remains platonic, out of respect for the ongoing divorce proceedings. We both agreed to keep things simple until the legalities were behind us. 12 days ago, after I said goodbye to Kendra, Karen called. She had just explained everything to her daughters, Amber and Meadow, but they didn't believe her. Karen was visibly upset, so I asked if her eldest daughter was still there. When Karen said yes, I asked to speak with her. I told Amber that her mother was my lawyer and explained how we had come to realize we were dealing with the same betrayal. I urged her to view the evidence before making any judgments. Later that evening, Karen's daughters arrived at my house. I began by explaining how our security system worked. The outside cameras could be disabled upon entering the house, but if someone forgot to turn off the internal ones, they would capture both sound and movement. I thought it was important they understood this before seeing the footage. Then, I showed them the conversation between my wife and our daughters. Amber and Meadow were visibly shocked. Hearing their father discuss intimate details about his relationship with my wife was deeply unsettling for them. "This is what your mother saw after I hired her," I explained. "Because of her ethics, she couldn't tell you the truth directly. But now, you can see it for yourselves. Right now, your father and my wife are in Vancouver pretending to be on a business trip. I have investigators gathering more evidence, and when Kendra returns, she'll be served with divorce papers." I had a long conversation with Amber and Meadow about the meaning of marriage vows. I told them forgiveness might come easily, but rebuilding trust was the real challenge. I also expressed my concern that my daughters were learning from their mother's behavior, a pattern Kendra admitted had been ongoing for years. This situation has forced all of us to question the sincerity of those vows and to view our relationships through a much harsher lens. It's a sobering realization, but one we cannot ignore. I pointed out to Meadow and Amber that the actions of their parents had torn our lives apart. Without our children, everything we thought we knew about our families would feel like a lie. Meadow, Karen's youngest, surprised me with her insight. If our spouses truly respected us, they would never have betrayed us. Her words hit hard but rang true. After our conversation, I called Karen to share how it went. She later told me that her daughters found her approachable and easy to talk to, a small comfort amidst the chaos. Amber mentioned that I reminded her of her grandfather, who had a knack for making complex issues simple and understandable. She said it was a trait she associated with our shared rural upbringing. Karen and I are rediscovering the value of that simpler life we once left behind. Moving away from the relentless rush and competition of our current lives feels like the right choice. The next morning, I got back on Interstate East, continuing my journey. By nightfall, I hoped to cross into northern Utah near the Wyoming border. I was in no rush, stopping to take in sights I'd always wanted to see. Surprisingly, I felt at peace. That evening, after checking into a cozy inn, I logged into my new email account. Among the messages was one from my eldest son-in-law, David, asking me to call him. I dialed the number he provided. "Hi, David," I said. "Hi, Dad. Glad you called," he replied. "There's a lot to tell you, but first, where are you?" "I'm on the road, licking my wounds," I said with a serious chuckle. "I'll pass that along to the person who asked if I'd heard from you," David said. "It's been a crazy day. Kendra showed up at the office this morning, demanding to know where you were. She thought she could catch a plane and work things out with you." He paused, then continued. "When she found out you had retired, she asked for confirmation. I got called in to talk to her. I told her you'd taken early retirement and were moving. When she asked where, I said I didn't know. That's when she called me a liar, saying, 'You know where the retirement checks are sent or can find out.' It went downhill from there. Security had to escort her out. I couldn't help but laugh. She doesn't take rejection well? Does she?" "Oh, it gets better," David said. "Carrie called to say her mom got fired right after Eric Hopper was served with your $5 million alienation of affection suit. Kendra had to call a taxi to get home. Then she went to a labor lawyer to file a case, and they served Eric around for this afternoon." David's tone grew more serious. "Carrie wants to come home to see our son. I told her we're not doing anything until I confirm he's mine. If she doesn't like that, she can take me to court." "What did she say?" I asked. "She claims she hasn't slept with anyone since we married," David replied. But I reminded her of what she said in the recorded chat. That's not what her own words suggest. "Well, at least they're not bothering me about it," I said with a chuckle. "This impromptu vacation has been the best thing I've done in years." David's voice softened. "Are you really going through with the divorce, Dad?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "The twins moved in with Kendra, and your wife is staying there too. Right now, no one wants anything to do with them. Everyone's too upset to think straight. As for me, it depends on the DNA test," David admitted. "If he's not my son, there's no reason for us to stay together. I feel like I was sold a false story. Carrie showed me only what she wanted me to see, like bait on a hook. I've had 6 months to process everything. Believe me, it takes that long to figure out what you can live with. Take your time. Don't rush into anything." "I won't," I assured him. "Time has helped me move on and restart my life. It's heading in a new direction, and I'm excited about it." "So, you're not coming back?" David asked. "Only if my lawyers need me for court," I said. "The place I'm moving to has lower taxes and a cheaper cost of living. Financially, it's the smarter choice. Plus, the CEO wants me to work as an advisor occasionally. It's a flexible arrangement. I can handle it from my new home with a secure line on my computer. That way, I'll never be completely out of the loop." I told him I'd agree as long as there was no need for a suit or tie. "Well, Dad, they already miss you here," David said. "I've heard people talking about how they used to bring you their ideas, and you'd point out what was good and what could go wrong. You've left quite a gap. Is this your new cell phone number?" he asked. "Yes, but for now, keep it to yourself," I replied. "One last thing. Next time you talk to Kendra, tell her she can go back to one of her other friends with benefits. After all, they seemed fine with her before. And if she argues, remind her that for the last 10 years, she's treated me like her backup plan." I didn't realize it then, but David recorded our conversation and sent it to my wife and daughters. I'd later learned that Kendra was not impressed. She thought I had no right to advise my son-in-law about anything. "After all, I'm just a man," she supposedly scoffed. But my daughters were beginning to see the cost of following their mother's lifestyle. Each of their husbands wanted as little to do with them as possible, and tensions were rising. Slowly, they started to turn on their mother. My next call was to Karen, who was thrilled to hear from me. She told me her staff had been overwhelmed with 5 more divorce cases sparked by my wife's surprise birthday party. Apparently, 1 or 2 of Kendra's former partners had also been exposed. Karen mentioned that she had heard about Kendra's firing and speculated that it was Eric Hopper's attempt to reconcile with his wife. Karen, however, wasn't interested. She revealed that the board of directors had already spoken to her, explaining that Kendra would be rehired and even promoted while Eric would be demoted for misusing company resources. "She's just that good at her job," Karen said with a hint of grudging respect. Karen had also told her daughters that she was moving back to South Dakota after the divorce. "If you want to stay in California, you'll need to find your own place or live with your dad," she had told them. When Meadow asked her, "Is it because you've fallen in love with Colin?" Karen replied honestly, "I have, but we haven't acted on it yet." "Well, I had to explain your story," Meadow said, smiling. "I hope it makes you feel young again." "It does," Karen admitted. She then invited them to join her when she moved, adding, "You're old enough to decide what kind of life you want. Learn from what I'm dealing with." I realized Kendra's chances of finding another man like me were slim, given the publicity surrounding our breakup. Her actions had likely ruined her chances for an honest, loving relationship. I wondered how long it would take her to realize that. Around lunchtime, I pulled into my hometown. It had taken over 3 days to get here, and I was ready for a break. I stopped at a small diner for a burger and fries, enjoying the peace of being back. As I sipped my coffee, an older man walked in, his face lighting up with recognition. "Son of a witch. Is that you, Colin White?" he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Good to see you, Uncle John," I replied with a smile. "You're looking well." "So, where's your wife?" he asked. "She and our daughters are at the house, getting it ready," I replied. "I've got a few plumbing fixes to tackle, but it's almost move-in ready. They've cleaned it up, got the fridge repaired, and replaced the fuses on the old stove. You'll probably want to modernize it," Uncle John said. "We're in town now. Robert and his wife are running the farm." "Good," I said. "Order some food on me, and let's catch up." After lunch, I stopped by the local grocery store to pick up some basics. Food prices here were surprisingly lower than I remembered, and I ended up filling 2 carts. At the checkout, the cashier turned out to be an old classmate, and we spent a few minutes catching up. When I arrived at my family home, I was surprised at how good it looked from the outside. My aunt and cousins came out to greet me, helping unload the groceries. Once everything was put away and the coffee brewed, they left me to settle in. I took a closer look around the house. Uncle John was right. Major updates were needed. The plumbing worked, but the fixtures were outdated. The wiring seemed functional, but might not handle modern appliances. Still, as I stood in the quiet kitchen, I felt a sense of calm. This house had history, and it was time to give it a future. I called Uncle John to ask for recommendations for good construction crews. 2 hours later, he showed up with a group of contractors ready to assess the property. The timing worked out perfectly, giving me a chance to unpack while they looked over the house. After their inspection, the consensus was clear. It would cost less to build a new house than to repair the old one. The current structure needed a complete overhaul, new electrical wiring, plumbing, and everything in between. However, the barn was in surprisingly good shape. With a new roof, a few boards replaced, and a fresh coat of paint, it could be like new. I decided to remove the stalls and convert the barn into a workshop for tractor and heavy equipment repairs. That evening, I called Karen to share what I had learned. Together, we decided on a 1-floor house with a small cold cellar for storage, built on a 4-foot crawl space and double insulated to withstand the harsh winters. I promised to visit her brother-in-law's dealership the next day and update her on my plans. The following morning, I returned the rental truck and headed to the nearest car dealership. I purchased a slightly used Ford truck with low mileage, got it transferred, insured, and ready for the road. Next, I stopped by the bank to make a deposit, pick up blank checks, and place an order for more. The difference in gas prices here compared to California was astounding. Everything was cheaper. Later, I visited Karen's older brother, Joseph, who turned out to be a familiar face from high school. We reminisced about old times, and he surprised me by offering me a job on the spot. "Start whenever you're ready," he said with a grin. As we talked, he teased me about my relationship with his sister. "I never really understood her first husband," he admitted. "Neither did I replied with a chuckle. By the end of the day, I had finalized plans with the contractor. We agreed on a 4-bedroom home with a spacious 2-car garage located behind the old house. The new build would feature a modern septic system and use gas for heating, water, and cooking, with a large generator for backup electricity. The open floor plan would include a laundry room, a mudroom with garage access, and a double-insulated crawl space. The divorce settlement would more than cover the cost. That evening, I updated Karen on the signed contract and told her about my meeting with Joseph. She seemed pleased with how everything was coming together. The next day, David called with an update. "Kendra hired a private investigator to find you," he said. "She thinks there's still a chance to work things out." I sighed. "There's nothing to work out, David. If we got back together, she'd just repeat her actions. She's not sorry for what she did. She's only sorry she got caught. David paused, considering my words. You're right. It's amazing how smart people can fail to see simple truths. No wonder our government has so many problems. I continued. Kendra doesn't see her actions as the issue. She thinks I'm the one who needs to change and accept her behavior. She's deluded. David agreed. I think I need to have a serious talk with Carrie about understanding marriage equality. My father used to say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. She needs to realize I'm not just here to serve her needs. I suggested he demand marriage counseling, preferably with a conservative counselor who could provide Carrie with a different perspective. If she doesn't find balance, your relationship might not survive, I said, and you might have to walk away for your own sanity. David agreed, thanking me for the advice. In the meantime, I focused on the barn. Tearing out the old stalls kept me busy, and the physical labor felt good. After years behind a desk, it was refreshing to use my hands and muscles again. I found myself genuinely enjoying the work. On Thursday night, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Karen. My daughters thought you needed cheering up, she said, her voice warm. They called my brother to tell him about our divorces. They didn't know he'd known for months. Karen went on to explain that Meadow had told her uncle how I discovered their father's cheating and mentioned how I had met Karen. Joseph had filled in the rest, recounting how I had helped him secure the dealership years ago. He said he owes you a lot, Karen added. The conversation between Karen's family members slowly brought everything to light. Meadow and Amber had explained our connection, including how our shared experiences had brought us closer. They talked about us for over an hour, Karen said softly. Slowly, everything came out. They were surprised that their favorite uncle approved of our relationship as it is, Karen said, her voice light with amusement. Please make sure they don't let that information slip. Kendra hired a firm to find me, I said, shaking my head. She's convinced that if she can just talk to me, she can get me to forgive her and come back. How did you find that out? Karen asked, curious. I called my oldest son-in-law at the office. He's keeping me in the loop, I replied. Plus, talking to me is helping him figure out how to move forward. No problem there, Karen said with a chuckle. My daughters won't tell anyone, especially after what they've done. I raised an eyebrow. What did they do? They used my credit card to book me a flight. I arrive at the regional airport at 8 p.m. Friday night. Karen explained, her tone warm. Start living the dream, Mom, they said. You both deserve it. When Friday night came, I was waiting at the airport with a dozen red roses, feeling a mix of excitement and youthful nervousness. It had been years since I felt this silly, like a teenager on his first date. Karen stepped off the plane, her brunette hair styled elegantly to frame her face. She wore casual blue jeans, a yellow blouse, and a soft denim-like jacket, looking both comfortable and effortlessly beautiful. I couldn't help but smile. Knowing she hadn't eaten, I grabbed her suitcase, and we headed to Ruby Tuesdays, where I had a surprise planned. After parking and securing her luggage, we walked in. Her brother and sister-in-law were already waiting for us. By the end of dinner, Karen had agreed to represent her brother as his lawyer once she moved back home. Driving down the long driveway to my childhood home, I felt a mix of anticipation and nostalgia. The house, a snug and solid 60s style build, had aged but held its charm. Karen's face lit up as she stepped inside, taking it all in. After showing her around, I poured her a beer and pulled out some of my parents' old records. Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., and Sinatra's smooth voices filled the room as we snuggled on the couch, laughing and reminiscing like teenagers. These were the songs our parents had loved, and now they felt like the perfect soundtrack for this new chapter in our lives. We were taking things slow, both wanting to ensure we were headed in the right direction. Meanwhile, Kendra was unraveling. She was used to getting her way, and the silence from me was driving her mad. She couldn't find any trace of my movements. No flight records, no car rentals, nothing. Even the private investigator she hired came up empty-handed. My Facebook page was gone, my credit cards were canceled at my request, and even her checks for my Social Security number led nowhere. Every day, my lawyer called her, asking for the name of her attorney. But Kendra hadn't hired one, convinced our marriage could still be saved. Frustration mounted as she realized how little she actually knew about my life. My family had always been unimportant to her, so she had never bothered to learn their names. Now, she was paying the price for that indifference. Even her daughters were starting to worry. I had always maintained daily contact with them, but since leaving, the only one who had heard from me was David, and he wasn't talking. David had told Carrie there would be no contact until he confirmed little Colin was his son. Yet he didn't seem to be in any rush to do that. When Carrie confronted him, he laughed, which only enraged her further. That's not how a husband is supposed to act, she fumed. Kendra found the whole situation deeply unsettling. I had always done what was expected, always been the steady presence in her life. Now, she had to hire others to take care of the things I used to handle with care and love. And it wasn't the same. The hired help lacked the attention to detail and personal investment I had always shown. The strain of the situation was affecting everyone. If I had just continued playing the role she expected, Kendra believed none of this would be happening. Her daughters wouldn't be facing the collapse of their marriages, and her life wouldn't be falling apart. But now, even her daughters were starting to blame her, and that was something she simply couldn't accept. It's each woman's responsibility to keep her life in line, Kendra rationalized to herself. Every man in a relationship has to learn that the woman is the boss. But for once, her belief in her control over others was being tested and failing. When Kendra found Colin, she vowed to make him pay dearly for what she considered improper conduct toward her and their children. But Colin, far removed from Kendra's schemes, was sitting on the porch with Karen, sharing a quiet moment over a cup of coffee while watching the sunrise. Until now, I never understood why my parents always started their mornings like this when they had the chance. Being here, Karen said, her voice soft, feeling loved and appreciated by the universe. And by you, gives you the assurance you can face anything. We didn't need to speak much. The silence spoke volumes as we held hands, watching the world come alive. I squeezed her hand, just like my dad used to do with my mom. Words weren't necessary. The connection said it all. Driving back, I felt a profound sense of returning to my true self. I can see the change starting in me, I said quietly. I feel more secure and at peace than I can ever remember. Karen nodded, her smile warm. I saw that cloud lift from you last night as you walked toward me. It's a feeling you can't describe until you've experienced it. Your words show it's affecting you too, I said. It is, she admitted. It's a cultural shock for me. Nothing here feels fake. It's all real. The morning silence, the simplicity, it lets you hear yourself think. I'd forgotten how calming that is. Moments like these reinforce the quality of life we were rediscovering. This weekend was an opening for both of us, a chance to learn about each other and ourselves. Although we came close, we didn't cross the line into physical intimacy. We both wanted more from this relationship than just sex. Meeting Karen's parents for the first time turned out to be a wonderful experience. Her father quickly put me to work fixing the timing on his tractor and a few other minor repairs. It took about 4 hours, but when I finished, the tractor ran smoothly and steered straight. Karen watched me clean up in her parents' mudroom, a playful smile on her face. Mudrooms, she said, were invented so husbands wouldn't track dirt into the house. My mom always said that. Her dad was impressed. This would have been in the shop for a week if you hadn't been here. Her mom, thrilled about Karen's impending move back home, chatted excitedly about the changes ahead. But Sunday evening came too soon, and it was hard to see Karen off at the airport. Still, we both knew this was only the beginning. 2 months had passed since I left California, and things were moving forward. Kendra had finally hired a lawyer, and the court approved a 50-50 split of our assets. Karen's husband was still being petty, fighting to save every nickel he could. David and Carrie were seeing a marriage counselor after confirming that little Colin was indeed his son. Progress was slow, but Carrie was beginning to see the situation from a different perspective. Meanwhile, Kendra and my daughters, Faith and Hope, were shaken by their divorces. Their ex-husbands made it clear they couldn't trust them again. Sadly, I understood why. The relationship between Kendra and our daughters had shifted permanently. They blamed her, at least in part, for their failed marriages, and that tension wouldn't be easy to mend. I found myself back in Los Angeles, flown in by private jet to spend a week or two testing the company's newest model. My job was to ensure its durability, strength, ease of movement, and repairability before it went into mass production. The firm had booked me into a Hampton Inn and suites, and I planned to use my evenings to decompress. One evening, Amber Hopper invited her mother to dinner at the hotel restaurant. By chance, they were already seated when I walked in. Amber spotted me and smiled as I approached. "Mama," Amber said, a hint of mischief in her voice, "I hope you don't get mad, but I invited a friend to join us. You might want to slide over a little." "What are you up to?" Karen asked, shifting in her seat. Amber grinned. "It's just someone Meadow and I have gotten to know over the last few weeks. We're both looking forward to spending more time with him." When Karen turned to face me, her expression lit up with recognition. A huge smile spread across her face as she realized who I was. Over the past 2 months, I had grown a mustache and goatee, giving me a slightly different look, but her joy was unmistakable. My body fat had turned to muscle, and Karen noticed immediately. "Wow, what a surprise," she said, her eyes lighting up. "I love your new look, but what are you doing here?" "First of all," I said with a grin, "I'm going to have a nice dinner with my girlfriend and her daughter. During the meal, I'll explain everything." I turned to Amber and added, "Thank you for helping me pull off this little surprise." Just as we were starting to order, Meadow arrived. "I hope I'm not too late," she said, sliding into the booth. I had to work a bit longer than I planned. During dinner, I explained that I was in town to test a new model slated for release in a couple of years. The biggest innovation? A massive tractor powered by natural gas. I described how, if successful, farmers could build refill stations on-site at the cost of labor. The equipment itself would include the necessary fixtures for a pump. Since natural gas is cheaper and cleaner than gasoline, we think it could be a game changer, I said. If the test model meets expectations, it will launch as part of a new product line. Just before dessert, Amber and Meadow surprised us with a question. "Do you two hope to be settled in South Dakota before school starts in September?" Amber asked. Karen nodded. "Yes, why? How far is Vermilion from your new home, Mom?" Amber asked. "About 50 miles from the farm." "Why?" Amber smiled. "I start working on my MBA at the University of South Dakota this fall. Can I live with you guys? If not, I can stay at Uncle Joseph's. I chose that school because it's one of the cheapest in the country, and staying with you would help cut down living costs." Karen smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You were right," I said to her. "We're building a new 4-bedroom house. It'll be finished next month." Turning to Amber, I added, "We wanted to be ready in case you both decided to come. So, let your mom know what colors you want for your rooms." "You were planning on us coming?" Meadow asked, clearly touched. "More like hoping," Karen said, her voice steady. "We wanted you to make the decision yourselves. If I pushed you, you might resent Colin, and he doesn't deserve that." Meadow tilted her head. "How did you figure that out, Mom?" Karen smiled. "Colin asked me if I trusted you two to make the right decision. When I said yes, he told me to let you decide. He reminded me that my relationship with you is stronger than with your dad." Amber and Meadow turned their gazes to me, puzzled. Finally, Amber spoke. "That first night, you sized us up. By the time we left, you knew what we'd do. Didn't you, Colin?" I nodded. "I had a pretty good idea. I knew you'd go for further education, Amber, and that it could be anywhere. Meadow was my focus. When she mentioned respect, I knew things would work out. The hardest part," I continued, "was reminding your mother that it would all turn out okay. The unknown is always tough, but time reveals the answers." As dinner wrapped up, Karen and I planned to see a movie while Amber and Meadow headed home. That's when Kendra spotted me. She was driving into the lot just as I opened the car door for Karen. It took her a few moments to recognize me. My lifestyle had changed so much since we'd last seen each other. I no longer spent my days behind a desk. Months of working on the barn, installing a wood stove, general cleanup, and repairs had firmed up my muscles and completely erased the potbelly I'd carried for years. By the time Kendra realized it was me, we were gone. After dropping Karen off, I returned to my suite at the Hampton Inn. Before heading to bed, I left a request for a wake-up call in the morning. The next day, security greeted me warmly and signed me in. It was time for my first look at the finished design of the new tractor model. Standing in the testing facility, I felt a sense of pride, not just for the work, but for the new chapter of my life that had begun. It was this part of my work I had always enjoyed the most, seeing the finished product ready for final approval before mass production. Research and development could be tedious, but moments like this made it all worthwhile. I got to work early, diving into testing before the rest of the team arrived. By the time they showed up, I had already identified a couple of minor issues, including rerouting the feeding line to avoid direct heat exposure. I documented everything in my report, and the team was both surprised and pleased by my efficiency and my appearance. The president himself arrived just as I was putting the test tractor through its paces, hauling and pushing loads across the mudbed we had created. The machine handled beautifully, maneuvering with ease. He laughed as he saw me in blue jeans, a white t-shirt, and a blue baseball cap worn backward. "Colin, you're still the man," he said. "If anyone could turn this tractor on its head, it'd be you. What's your first impression of this beast?" I grinned. "If it can handle everything I throw at it, this will be one of the top 5 designs we've ever created. Aside from a couple of minor adjustments, it's performing flawlessly. And as a bonus, it's more fuel efficient than a traditional diesel engine." I offered him my hand. "Good to see you again, Pete." "It's great to see you too," he replied, shaking my hand warmly. "We'd give you your old position back in a heartbeat, but by the look of you, I can see why you've moved on. Where did you find the fountain of youth?" Little did he know that my secret to evaluating new products was to treat them like I treated my first truck, pushing them to their limits. By the end of the day, the tractor had proven itself, and I was satisfied. 1 down, 9 to go, I thought as I wrapped up for the evening. It was almost 8 p.m. when I returned to my hotel, covered in dried mud from head to toe. As I walked into the lobby, I spotted Carrie and David waiting for me. Carrie was holding little Colin, who had grown so much since I'd last seen him. "Hi, Dad," Carrie said, walking toward me with a smile. "You're looking great. Do you have time to talk? Or are you too busy?" I glanced at David, who gave me a subtle nod. "Sure," I said. "Well, let me shower first. You can wait here, or you're welcome to come up to my suite. It has a kitchen, and we can order food." "Let's go up and order food while you shower," Carrie suggested. "We need a private talk, and it's long overdue." While I showered, they ordered room service. As I got dressed, Karen called, so I updated her and promised to call her back later. Once ready, I cracked open a bottle of Crown Royal, pouring drinks for everyone. For Carrie and David, I added a splash of water to their glasses and gave them a stir. Carrie began, "Dad, David and I have been through a lot these past 2 months. The conversation you found brought everything to the surface. Honestly, I just moved back home last week. Mom has been talking about her outside relationships for years, and we all thought you knew and approved." She paused, then continued. "Mama justified her actions by saying you had completely different sexual drives. David and I were going nowhere, so I took a polygraph to clarify what I had and hadn't done. It was the only way we could begin to rebuild trust. Without it, we were headed for divorce." I nodded. "I hope you both understand that the damage done to your relationship will take time and complete honesty to heal. Rebuilding trust isn't easy, but it's worth the effort." I reached for my grandson, holding him close. His little head rested on my shoulder, and I felt a wave of peace wash over me. I asked David to snap a picture of the moment. Carrie continued, her voice thoughtful. "In a lot of ways, I realized I was behaving like Mom, justifying everything through my own perspective. It's only now that I see how wrong it was, no matter how I tried to rationalize it." She sighed. "I was acting without thinking, and it felt so natural. Now, I find myself stopping to think carefully before doing anything. To be honest, it's been a real shock." Her honesty touched me, and I could see that she was beginning to truly reflect on her actions. I held little Colin close, silently hoping that this new understanding would help Carrie and David find their way forward, together. "Dad," David said, his voice steady, "I'm seeing a side of Carrie I didn't know was there. It's led me to believe we've got more than a 50-50 chance of making it." "Just remember," I replied, "it takes time, honest communication, and a heart and mind that really listen. You're both young, and it's not unreasonable to seek independent help or advice. Your mother, Kendra, allowed societal influences to interfere with our marriage until she justified throwing her vows away. I'd bet she's still blaming me for it ending. You're right, Dad, Carrie interjected. I told my sisters I was done listening to her justify herself. I have a marriage I want to save. We got into an argument and I told them, when you get your heads out of where they don't belong, we can talk. Until then, don't waste my time. At that moment, our food arrived, providing a welcome pause. Sharing dinner with them felt comforting, a glimpse of what family connections could still be. Carrie asked if I'd been following some diet plan. I laughed and explained that my transformation came from working physically instead of mentally. No desk, no couch, just a lot of heavy lifting, I said with a smile. It was 10 p.m. by the time they left. As she hugged me goodbye, Carrie whispered, "I like this new dad I'm seeing." I chuckled. Since the divorce started, parts of myself that had been buried are resurfacing. The long-term relationship with your mother affected me in ways I couldn't see before. Later, I texted Karen to see if she was still awake. When she replied, I called and recounted the evening's events. Time heals all wounds, I said, but that's not really true. It's more about learning to accept what happened and adapting to it. That doesn't make it right, though progressives might argue otherwise. Tuesday evening, around 7 p.m., I walked into the Hampton Inn lobby and spotted my two youngest daughters, Faith and Hope, waiting for me. My gut told me Kendra had orchestrated this double-barreled ambush, and I wasn't wrong. Once in my suite for privacy, they unleashed their grievances, accusing me of cowardice for walking out on their mother. They admitted that their marriages were over because their husbands, like me, couldn't handle liberated, modern women. I'd had enough. Calmly, I called security. When they arrived, I asked them to escort my daughters out. As they were removed, security informed them in no uncertain terms. We don't appreciate high-class escorts trying to pass on social diseases to our guests. Karen thought the entire ordeal was hilarious. Those two will be doing a lot of soul-searching tonight, she said. Without love, someone always pays for sex in one way or another. Can I tell Amber and Meadow about this? Go ahead, I said, laughing. If I wanted to light a stick of dynamite without a match, I couldn't have done a better job. 2 hours later, Carrie called me. Bravo, Dad. Well done, she said, unable to hide her amusement. Faith and Hope just left here still in tears. They finally learned their crap stinks, just like everyone else's. I couldn't resist, I admitted, still laughing. Neither of them gave me a chance to explain anything. Their conduct made it clear they weren't interested in hearing my side. So, I made the only call I could. Security ran background checks on both Faith and Hope, which came back clean. They tried to explain, claiming that having different last names had caused the misunderstanding. Security didn't buy it. I told them when their friends with benefits were whining and dining them, they were, in fact, being paid in advance. By the look on their faces, I think they finally understood. There was a pause before I added quietly, I'm so glad I never went down that road. Honestly, I'm ashamed I ever talked about it. Was David part of the conversation? I asked. He heard it all and was pleasantly surprised by how I explained things, Carrie replied. It helped us a lot because now we're both seeing what happened with clearer eyes. But Dad, how could our mother have convinced us that what she was doing was acceptable? Faith and Hope are really hurting. It's going to take a while for them to work it all out. Until recently, they couldn't see that their behavior made them no better than the people on the streets they had looked down on for years, she continued. I nodded thoughtfully. Carrie, think about this. You criticized me for what I did. Did you ever stop to think about what your behavior and your mother's did to me? Or did you only care about yourselves? That's a question I'm still trying to answer for myself, she admitted. Mom painted our world with rose-colored glasses, using her progressive views to make everything and anything acceptable. It took her getting caught for us to finally see the reality of our world for what it was. It's sad, Carrie added, that so much of society is still wearing those rose-colored glasses, blind to the truth staring them in the face. Carrie, I said, leaning forward, you've learned something that many adults never figure out in their entire lives. What's that, Dad? She asked curiously. The skill, ability, and knowledge to think logically, even about the simplest things, I replied. That's what sets your mother's world and mine so far apart. Welcome to my world. It's just too bad you had to learn it the hard way. On Wednesday night, I joined Karen and her daughters for a family dinner. The girls wanted to start planning the move and how we'd make it happen. I shared with them what I'd learned from Carrie the night before. After dinner, we did the dishes together, me washing and the girls drying and putting everything away. It felt like a true family moment. Then, as Karen and I stole a kiss, the girls caught us. They teased us relentlessly for the rest of the evening. By Friday evening, Karen and I were enjoying a private dinner at a cozy restaurant near the pier. Sitting across from each other, our hands intertwined, we sipped drinks and gazed into each other's eyes. The moment felt perfect until Faith and Hope walked in. The host approached our table. Your daughters noticed you missed their wave and were wondering if you'd allow them to join you. I hesitated, but Karen spoke up. Yes, we'd like them to join us. I stood up, moved to sit beside her, and took a deep breath. You can't leave things as they are with them, no matter what, Karen said gently. I know you don't like them right now, but you still love them. You have to hear them out. Karen was right, whether I wanted to admit it or not. The hostess escorted Faith and Hope to our table. Their expressions made it clear they had a lot on their minds. I waited until they were seated before speaking. Faith and Hope, let me introduce you to Karen, I said firmly. She's not only my lawyer, but now my girlfriend. If you're here to berate me again, please just leave. Dad, we deserve that, Faith said. We had a long talk with Carrie on Tuesday. She was brutal with us. She pulled no punches. We went there expecting support, but instead, we got the unvarnished truth shoved down our throats. Faith glanced at Hope, who continued. By the time she was done, we saw how our behavior painted a very ugly picture of who we had become. Carrie made it clear. We were being paid for our actions like hookers, just in a different way. Hope's voice faltered as she added. We talked it through and realized that a lot of people on the streets do it to survive, not by choice. We did it for fun, thinking we weren't doing anything wrong. That makes what we did so much worse. When we got home, we confronted Mom about it. Faith said, her voice tinged with anger. It turned into a huge argument. She called everything we said your dad's conservative bullcrap. She even said, so what if others got hurt? They should grow up. In our society, the only wrong is getting caught. Faith and Hope's words lingered in the air. It was clear they were beginning to see through the lies they had lived by for so long. And for the first time, I felt there might still be hope for my family, if they were willing to change. There are no real consequences for social crimes, Hope said. Look at our federal government. Some of the biggest politicians make money illegally, and nothing happens to them. It shows the laws only apply to some. Nothing is black or white, Faith added. Each of us has the right to live our lives as we see fit. But Mom still has no remorse or guilt. That's when it hit us, Hope said. We teach our students about right and wrong, but our own actions blurred those lines. By our conduct, we've undermined what we stand for. Faith continued. We're here today because we found a furnished 2-bedroom apartment nearby and rented it for 6 months. It's affordable and close to the school we both teach at. We figure it's our first step in rebuilding our lives. It's time for us to stop living Mom's lies and find out who we are without her influence, Hope said. We're moving in tomorrow since Mom will be busy with some political party event. When we saw you tonight, we both realized we needed to apologize, Faith admitted. Dad, we were so wrong. You really had no choice but to do what you did. We see that now. If you'd confronted us directly, it would have been 4 against 1, Hope said. You knew we had to work through it on our own. Sometimes you just have to let things work out naturally, I said. You were already forgiven because I saw your behavior as influenced by your mother. I'll forgive Kendra too, but I'll never give her a second chance. Her actions have always been self-centered and deliberate. I handed them my cell phone. Add your contact information, I said. They did and then added my number to theirs. What area is the phone number for? Hope asked. South Dakota, I replied. Oh my gosh, you moved back to Grandpa's farm, Faith exclaimed with a huge smile. He would be so proud. You know the farm? Karen asked curiously. Yes, Hope replied. Dad made sure we spent every summer there growing up until high school, when we developed the typical teenage attitude. We all learned to drive on Grandpa's tractor. Dad always drove us out there and brought us back. He talked to us every night while we were there. Mom, though, she never called. With her, it was out of sight, out of mind. Faith added, Grandma used to say Mom was the shallowest person she ever knew. So, Dad, why are you in town? Karen smiled. Can we get your cell number? The twins asked. Dinner turned into a celebration. The twins learned about the new house Karen and I were building and why I was in town. They found out Karen had 2 daughters, just a few years younger than them. While we were eating, Hope got a text from Carrie asking if they were okay. Hope replied, having dinner with Dad and his girlfriend, Karen. Faith and I will stop by afterward to explain everything. Later, Karen and I walked the pier, taking a relaxing stroll, marveling at how things were slowly falling into place. I'm surprised, Karen said. You moving away from them forced them to work through most of it on their own. My dad used to say, give a person enough rope and they'll hang themselves, I replied. It's true. Their behavior, when pointed out by their own gender, revealed what they really were. If I'd been here, it would have been 4 against 1. This way, they were against themselves. Their own sense of honesty and morality brought them down. Evil doesn't exist unless it's supported by people carrying out others' desires, Karen reflected. Too often, society blames others instead of taking responsibility. In many ways, I was their scapegoat, I said. I couldn't go along with what they were doing because, in my eyes, it was never right. To Kendra, that was a weakness she could exploit, Karen said. But I see it as one of your greatest strengths. Your actions show who you are. You're not someone who gets blown around by the whims of people without morals. You're solid. You stand your ground. Meanwhile, Kendra came home expecting to see her twin daughters. The political event on Saturday had taken longer than she expected, and she wanted to suggest they go out for the evening. As she thought about their last argument, she realized she had gone too far. It had gotten nasty because Kendra saw some of Colin's traits in their daughters, and she couldn't allow that. She tossed her purse on the counter to grab a Coke from the fridge when she noticed 2 house keys lying on the counter, pinned beneath a short note. We have moved out. We don't like what you helped us become. Good luck with your life. We have blocked your number. Faith and Hope. Kendra stared at the note, stunned. I haven't heard from them since Tuesday night when Dad had security throw them out of the Hampton Inn, Carrie said, watching her mother closely, gauging her reaction. Why did he have them thrown out? Kendra demanded. They wanted to tell him how poorly they thought he treated you, Carrie replied. They came at him hard, like they were trying to tear him down. But Dad had enough. He called security. When they arrived, he told them he wasn't buying what they were trying to sell. Carrie leaned forward, her tone sharpening. Security escorted them out the back door. You know what the staff said? They thought Faith and Hope were high-class hookers. Kendra paled, visibly shaken. But they're not, she stammered. You know that? Do I? Carrie shot back. Because when they showed up here in tears and told me their story, I said something to them, Mom. Do you want to know what I said? Kendra nodded hesitantly. Yes, maybe I do. I told them that when their so-called friends with benefits were whining and dining them, they weren't just being nice. They were paying for it in advance. Carrie laughed bitterly as she recalled the blank look on her mother's face. Now, Kendra was crying, her daughter's words slicing deep. The realization hit her like a freight train. Colin's truth had exposed everything. Kendra knew she could never face Colin again or speak to him alone. Carrie's statement was undeniable. It wasn't just an opinion, it was fact. And Kendra understood it immediately, though it destroyed her and everything she had built. All those weekends away with her friends with benefits, those so-called romantic adventures, were now reframed as transactions. Colin hadn't sugarcoated it. He'd laid the truth bare, and the rawness of it had left her nowhere to hide. It took weeks for her to fully grasp what Colin had meant in the video he'd recorded. That night when she came home from Vancouver, she realized her own actions had turned Faith and Hope into mirror images of what Colin had seen her as, a high-class hooker for over a decade. No man could live with that knowledge. No wonder Colin had left. She had given him no choice. For the first time, she saw the situation from his perspective. By walking away, he had left her something she had failed to leave him, dignity. Kendra's progressive lifestyle had gone too far. She no longer had her husband or daughters because she couldn't admit the truth. Taking responsibility wasn't in the Progressive playbook, and for the first time, she had no scapegoat. She had ruined herself. Looking around the house, Kendra realized she couldn't stay there. The memories were too heavy. She would sell it under the guise of downsizing. But in truth, she was running from the remnants of her shattered life. Eric Hopper would be pleased to know she was suffering. Like him, she was now utterly alone. Meanwhile, Karen and I returned to her house after a night of dancing and drinking. We fell asleep together on the couch. Her daughters, Meadow and Amber, found us the next morning and couldn't resist a little fun. Using Karen's phone, they snapped a few pictures and sent them to Faith and Hope. The twins called back immediately, and soon all 4 girls were on the phone, scheming. One of them found a blanket and covered us. I woke up to see Karen sleeping peacefully in my arms. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace and belonging. By 7 a.m., Meadow was already up, sitting in a chair and smiling at us. "I guess I'll have to get used to seeing this," she teased. "Mom looks so happy. I'll go make coffee for everyone." An hour later, the 4 of us were sitting at the kitchen table, laughing and talking. Karen then surprised me with an announcement. "This afternoon, my side of the family will be arriving for a get-together," she said. We hurried to prepare. I checked the fuel for the barbecue while Karen got dressed. The girls took charge of decorations and setting up. By the time her family arrived, the house was alive with laughter and warmth. It was a stark contrast to the life I had left behind, a life weighed down by secrets, lies, and unspoken resentment. Here, surrounded by genuine people and the woman I was growing to love, I felt like I was finally reclaiming my life. Kendra's choices may have destroyed her family, but for me, they paved the way to a new beginning. After finalizing the grocery list, we headed to my suite so I could shower and shave quickly. Then we made our way to the local grocery store. Just as we were walking in, we ran into Kendra on her way out. She stopped in front of me, her expression unreadable. "Colin," she said, "please let the girls know I'm selling the house. If they want anything, Carrie still has a key. Since they're not speaking to me, they can take what they want while I'm at work. The same goes for you." I nodded. "I'll pass on the message and give Karen power of attorney to act on my behalf," I said. As for me, I took what I wanted when I left. "I'm only in town for another 6 days." She nodded silently and walked away, leaving us to continue loading the vehicle with groceries. "That was awkward," Karen remarked as we drove back. "Something serious must have happened," I replied. She seemed distant, almost defeated. "It's not like her. Maybe it's not just the twins moving out. She was used to it being just us in the house. Whatever it is, it's something bigger." During the barbecue later that evening, Karen and I learned more about the letter Faith and Hope had left for their mother and the argument Carrie had with them afterward. Despite the heavy topics, the barbecue was a success. All 5 of our daughters got along remarkably well, and David and I mostly observed from the sidelines, letting them bond. Amber and Meadow doted on little Colin, and the sense of camaraderie between the families was heartwarming. I shared Kendra's comment from the grocery store. David immediately piped up. "I want that massive plasma TV," he joked, earning an eye roll from Carrie. I chuckled. Our first few family gatherings, since everything had unfolded, were going better than I had dared hope. After the guests left and the cleanup was done, Karen and I sat back with cold beers, enjoying the calm. "So Faith and Hope have decided to distance themselves from their mother to figure out who they are without her influence," Amber said, processing the revelation. "But why would they do that?" Karen asked. I explained. They followed their mother's example and got swept up in the friends with benefits lifestyle. It cost them their first marriages. It wasn't until I left Kendra that they began to see their own situations differently. Karen looked at me, surprised. "What happened after that?" "Last Tuesday, they confronted me about how I treated Kendra. Let's just say it didn't go well. I ended up having security escort them out," I said with a wry smile. Later that night, Carrie had a heated discussion with them. She pointed out something that hit hard. When their so-called friends with benefits were whining and dining them, they were essentially being paid in advance for their services. Amber's jaw dropped in shock. Karen reached for my hand. "David's right," Karen said after a moment. How people perceive us often carries more weight than how we see ourselves. Actions speak louder than words, and they leave a lasting impression. That's why I'm proud of Faith and Hope, I said. They've started taking responsibility for their behavior, and that's the first step to healing. The table fell silent for a moment before Amber broke it with a grin. "You're going to make a great dad, Dad." Karen burst out laughing, unable to contain herself. The rest of the week was peaceful. Karen and I spent as much time together as possible, cherishing the moments before I had to leave. The new tractor passed every test with flying colors, and the company president was thrilled. I named it Beta. Before I left, we had another family gathering. Faith and Hope grew closer to Karen's daughters, and little Colin practically refused to leave Karen's arms. Her motherly instincts were shining through. Meanwhile, Karen finalized the asset division with Eric. She offered him the house, which he eagerly accepted, thinking it might help him reconnect with their daughters. Karen, however, was content to move forward and leave the past behind. As Karen saw me off at the airport at the end of August, I reflected on everything that had happened. The homestead was ready back in South Dakota. The old house torn down, a new one built, the barn improved, and even the yard tidied up. This was the fresh start I'd been working toward, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. The final touch on the farm was rebuilding the driveway to the house and barn. Uncle John drove me to the airport, since I would be driving a U-Haul back. Over the last month, Karen had finalized the sale of her law practice, leaving the finalization of her divorce to an associate scheduled for early September. Meanwhile, multiple deliveries had arrived at the farm. Uncle John had helped set up the new furniture and donated what we didn't need from my parents' belongings to Goodwill or local neighbors. It was heartwarming to see a community coming together, reminding me of how neighbors used to help one another. On Friday, Karen met me at the airport around 6, her smile brighter than ever. Amber and Meadow were with her. As soon as we greeted each other, I gave her the surprise I had been planning. I dropped to one knee and proposed. Her daughters captured the entire moment on video, including me sliding the ring onto her finger. Amber and Meadow, fully in on the surprise, had arranged a celebratory dinner and dancing at a local restaurant. All our daughters and David joined us, making it a night to remember. Between David and me, the ladies kept us busy on the dance floor the entire evening. Later that night, Meadow insisted we wait in the car while she and Amber ran inside. They returned carrying a large overnight bag for Karen. "Mom, Dad," Amber began with a mischievous grin, "we've booked you a suite at the Hampton Inn for the weekend. We don't want to see you until Monday." When we arrived at the suite, we found a beautiful surprise waiting for us. A large basket with 2 bottles of champagne, chocolates, strawberries, balloons, roses, and 2 glasses. The card read, "Congrats from your 5 daughters." That weekend was magical. We barely left the suite. On Monday morning, after a leisurely breakfast, we picked up the U-Haul. To my surprise, the truck was larger than I expected. When I asked why, Karen told me I'd have to wait until later for the full explanation. That afternoon, Faith and Hope arrived with an announcement. They were moving east too. They had both secured teaching jobs with the Vermilion School Board near our new home. Karen had given them some furniture, and we loaded the truck with the belongings they wanted to keep from their mother's house, destined for a rental storage unit. They'd rented a 3-bedroom house through a real estate agent, planning to host Amber during bad weather or school breaks. It was another step toward healing and growth for the family. Meanwhile, I dropped the lawsuit against Eric Hopper when he agreed to cover all my court costs in Vancouver. By the end of September, Karen and I received our official divorce certificates, freeing us to move forward with our lives. On the last Saturday of October, Karen and I exchanged vows in front of our blended family. Carrie and David flew in with little Colin, making the day even more special. After the ceremony, Karen stood up to give a toast, surprising everyone with an announcement. "To my darling husband Colin," she began, "and to our wonderful family, I have some exciting news to share. There will be a new weight coming into the world sometime in May. The doctor hasn't told me if it's a boy or a girl yet." The room erupted in joy and applause as our new chapter began in the most beautiful way imaginable. And so life came full circle. What began as heartbreak and betrayal turned into redemption and renewal. Colin reclaimed his identity, his purpose, and found a love that valued him for who he truly was. Karen, too, found strength through her trials, building a future filled with hope, family, and a shared dream. Their story reminds us that sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the greatest transformations. It's not just about leaving behind what weighs you down. It's about rediscovering the parts of yourself you thought were lost. As Colin and Karen start this new chapter, surrounded by love and with a new life on the way, their message is clear. No matter how broken things seem, it's never too late to rebuild, reconnect, and start again. Thank you for watching this journey of love, resilience, and self-discovery. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales of transformation. See you next time.